Welcome, everybody. This is a great turnout for an important topic, so thank you all for being here. My name is Jim Marrill, and this event is organized by the 95490 Community Town Hall Planning Group. It's a mouthful, but it is definitely something we're interested in doing, is keeping this kind of event for important topics alive. This group is working and interested in a collective community process that includes all points of view. So thank you for being here and participating in this grassroots democratic process. We understand that the ideas and points of view expressed here are important to you. We encourage your participation in the ongoing development and planning of the town hall process. If you have ideas or topics important to you, there will be a comments section immediately following the panelists. When commenting or inquiring in this section, please try to be brief and concise. For the sake of our agenda and providing everyone with a chance to speak, we will limit public comments to one turn per person unless there's enough time for people to have additional opportunities to speak. Please introduce yourself before speaking. That would be great. Depending on the number of people who wish to speak, we'll generally limit the speaker's comment time to 2 minutes at the discretion of the moderator. So we seek the open sharing of ideas in a respectful and thoughtful manner. To that extent, we want everyone's voice to be heard. And at our discretion, we may limit the length of these comments and responses. We do support the free and a courteous exchange of ideas and questions related to the current topic.
De los presentes hispanohablantes, ¿hay alguna persona que no entienda lo que está sucediendo ahorita? Y si así es, si hay suficientes personas, puedo traducir, pero si no hay gente que no entienda, entonces me siento porque no tengo por qué estar acá adelante. ¿Nadie?
So the topic for today is immigration policies in the greater Willits and North County areas of Mendocino County. It's a potentially controversial and emotional subject. So in order to help us all do this in a positive and productive manner, we ask that everyone keep in mind the questions we're trying to focus on today, which are on the wall, which are what are the policies that we're talking about and who do they affect? How are these enforced? How will law enforcement respond? What are our concerns? What can we do as a community, a city, and a county? I'd like to introduce our panel today. We have Heather Gurewitz, who's a field representative from Jared Huffman's office, Mayor Gerry Gonzalez from the City of Willits, Saprina Rodriguez, council member, City of Willits, and Sheriff Tom Allman from Mendocino County.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Heather Gurewitz, and as you heard, I'm the Mendocino County field representative for Congressman Huffman. I am also the lead caseworker for any immigration casework for all of our district, and in case you're not familiar with your congressional district, it goes from the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge, Marin County, a good part of Sonoma County, Mendocino, Humboldt, Trinity, and Del Norte. So I handle anything that's immigration related, whether it's visas, passports, naturalization, all manner of things, including any connections regarding ICE activity, and immigration customs enforcement is ICE, and I'll talk about ICE, but and I'll get into that in a minute. And just to make sure that you understand what my role is for the office as a caseworker, basically it's a congressional role to advocate on the behalf of his constituents with the federal government. So if the federal government is not either being clear or is doing something that is not correct in their policies and procedures, then people contact their congressman. Usually they get me, particularly if it's immigration related or Mendocino County related. And I work on the congressman's behalf to advocate with those agencies. And so I work on a variety of different things, and I have become very familiar with immigration and customs enforcement lately. I've had many conversations over the last month with the field director's office for ICE. And I hope that the information that I can share today will be helpful. What you're hearing coming out of the executive office branch of our government is not entirely feasible or exactly what is possible for an agency to do at this point in time. So if you all remember when President Obama announced his DAPA program and his executive order because Congress was not able to pass an immigration package, basically what he had announced at that time was, we're going after felons, not families. And that's actually been a policy of the agency for quite some time. And in part, it's not necessarily have to do with their opinions or ideas. It has to do with capacity. So some of the things that you're hearing are maybe complex, and I just want to make sure that I can sort of clear some of the air on some of these issues. But when the president said ICE is going to hire 15,000 new immigration enforcement agents, there's a lot of things that come into that. First of all, ICE is still under a federal hiring freeze that has not been lifted for the agency. They have a number of openings in their agency, and this is all information that's been communicated to our office. Even if they were to lift the federal hiring freeze today, if you have ever applied for a federal agency job, it's not something that happens overnight, and there's very specific qualifications for that. Are we going to see something tomorrow? No. Is it possible? Is there some possibility that things could change in the future? Yes, but when we're talking about the future, we're talking, what I have been told by the agency is at least a year out. So those things are important. Now, I have also been talking with the agency about what is going on, because obviously you're hearing about enforcement actions. Nothing has changed from what they've been doing for the last year. And over the last year, over 90% of, and this information comes directly from ICE, over 90% of immigration arrests are people who have a criminal history or criminal background who are a threat to public safety. I can share more about this as we go on. I don't want to take too much time, but the important thing, and there are some things that people need to be sensitive to and understand, but basically when you talk about where ICE is at, they have some pretty serious capacity issues, so they're not doing raids. They're not doing employment enforced raids unless that employer is abusing their employees somehow. So I can share more as we go on, but that's where I wanted to start.
Thank you very much for being here. It's Sunday afternoon. I'm going to guess everybody in this room has something they could be doing other than being here. I do too. I have a quarter-mile fence. I need to get in, but I'm here, and my critters are happy I'm not building it. But anyway, let me be very brief on this, as brief as I can be. I'm going to talk about some social issues that cause emotions. Whether it's a death penalty, whether it's marijuana, whether it's abortion, whether it's immigration, I'm going to guess everybody in this room has never said, gosh, I wonder where I stand on that issue. Because everybody knows where they stand on these issues. But let me be very clear about immigration, and I appreciate Jim and his policy up here, new immigration policies. First of all, there's nothing new, because there's a lot of talking in Washington, and policies are not law. Policies are issued for the purpose of telling, with this point, telling federal agencies and federal employees how to enforce the law. But it's very important you know, and I'm not saying this out of ego, I'm saying this out of the law, a sheriff is responsible to the people and to the Attorney General of the state where he or she is elected. The sheriff does not required to follow a president's edict or a governor's edict. A sheriff answers to the people and to the Attorney General of the state. That's very, very important, because I follow the law, whether it's the enforcement law or whether it's the jail laws that we have. So we've learned a lot in Mendocino County about marijuana. We've learned, number one, if we are the tip of the spear, we attract the attention of the federal government. I can say that for a fact as a person who was investigated by a federal grand jury for a rumor, okay? So being on the tip of the spear in immigration means that if we were to become a sanctuary county, a sanctuary state, a sanctuary city, we are placing ourselves once again on the tip of the spear, and I'm telling you that may not be where we want to go, because that draws attention to our community. So you have my word that as sheriff, I will make sure that deputy sheriffs enforce state and local laws as a constitution allows them to do in Mendocino County, and that if a federal law is going to be enforced, remember this, and our Constitution is very clear on this, the only person who can enforce a federal law is a federal law enforcement officer. And he or she can't enforce state and local laws, and state and local enforcement officers can't enforce federal laws. And we need to keep that separation very clear, because there is not a state law that says being an illegal immigrant is against the law. That's federal law. And so my deputy sheriffs don't arrest people for their immigration status. As a matter of fact, from the time of an investigation to the time of booking into jail, if an arrest is made, we don't ask citizenship. We do ask place of birth, but I know many American citizens who were born abroad too. So believe it or not, we have other things to do. We really do. Now, that being said, I want you to know we cannot turn a blind eye to violent crime. And if there is a citizen or a non-citizen that violates a crime and it's a violent crime, my job is to maintain public safety in this county. And we still don't ask citizenship. If it's an illegal immigrant or a citizen that is violating a violent crime, domestic violence, and some people would say drunk driving, I'm in that category, drunk driving is a violent crime because of the death that occurs, then what happens, and this is real brief, and I'll try to be real brief, Jim, let me explain to you the status, or the booking process when anybody's arrested, because this is going to answer your question of how the federal government gets involved. Everybody who gets arrested, their fingerprints are taken electronically. You've heard of LiveScan, many of you have had LiveScan. Those fingerprints that when someone is arrested are sent to the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice. That's what we do. Whether I'm arrested, you're arrested, or Charlie Manson's arrested, those fingerprints are sent to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice does send those fingerprints to ICE. On everybody who gets arrested, ICE makes a determination on what they're going to do with that person. Now, we will not, and I know the cameras are rolling, so I want to make sure I say this clearly. We, the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office, will not hold anybody 1 minute longer than what a local judge or a federal judge has, with a signature, told us we can hold them for. So if a person is sentenced to 90 days, then they do 90 days, and on the 90th day, they're released from jail. Now, on day 89, if immigration calls us and say, listen, we'd like to speak to him, can you hold him for another 3 days? We'll say either you have to give us a signature of a magistrate that has ordered his holding, or you can be here tomorrow when he gets out in the lobby, because he gets out at 5 in the morning, and you can talk to him. But we will not hold anybody past the time of their release based on a phone call. It has to be a signature of a federal magistrate. And that's very, very important, because I want to let you know, and I asked my jail commander Thursday, several days ago, how many times have we ever got a signature from a magistrate to hold somebody longer than when their sentence was due? And the jail commander said in 20 years he's seen it happen 1 time. So we're talking violent crimes. We don't notify ICE to say we think this person's not a citizen. Really and truly, once again, we have other things to do. So I appreciate the very beginning of this of Breathe, because things happen we see things that happen on TV back east, Southern California, everywhere else, but there's a reason that we're not seeing things happen in Mendocino County. I would like to think that our law enforcement officers get it. They understand. And maintaining public safety, maintaining the quality of life is very important. And let me clearly say this. Mendocino County depends on our service industry, whether it's hotel workers, loggers, fishermen, fisherwomen, whatever it is, we depend on the service industry. Our economy could be seriously sunk, thank you. My son's a fisherman, I hate using that word. We could be disrupted by having just the rumor going around that there's going to be a sweep, a raid, whatever word. Now, I want to end with this. People are going to ask me, and they have asked me, Sheriff, will you send people with immigration if they come to Mendocino County? And just let you know, between Pleasanton and the Oregon border, I've been told there's 3 immigration officers, and The city of Santa Rosa has 160,000 people. We have a total of 87,000. So I don't think the chances are pretty good that they're going to show up here. But I want you to know that we have other things to do. And if you hear of a rumor, if you hear of the green bus, it's been on Facebook, the green bus that's doing an immigration sweep, it belongs to the California Department of Corrections, and it's been going up and down 101 for as long as I've been a cop. But we will send a person with immigration if they come into Mendocino County for this very reason. And this is important. If immigration calls me and says we're coming into Mendocino County, I want to have the relationship with them that, number one, they're going to call me and say they're coming in because they don't have to. And number two, they will afford me the ability to send a deputy sheriff with them, so if something goes awry, we have our employee that I can call in and I can say, I need you to tell me what happened. Because if a federal agent comes to my office and I could say, I want you to tell me what happened, he could say, I don't have to tell you anything. But my employee would tell me exactly what happened. So we would make sure it's tape recorded, we would have accountability, and we would have at the end of the day, we would know what happened. So I appreciate you being here, but this may be a very boring meeting for you. Thank you.
So I wanted to thank you because I really think what you're talking about here is also a perception problem, right? We talked about this earlier, and I think that people need to hear that we are a community. I mean, yes, we follow the law, but that law is by county and by state, and that there's some support in our concerns. And I think that you've addressed those, and I appreciate that. Okay.
And let me just say that if somebody has a concern that they don't want to talk about today, the Sheriff's Office webpage, MendocinoSheriff.com, my email's there. If you send us an email, we'll get back to you as quick as possible. Because, as I said in the paper, emotions can either cause fear or emotions can cause calm. And I'm trying to cause calm right now to where our community could just continue doing what we're doing. We're starting to grow, we're starting to build, and our quality of life is very high. So that's exactly why I'm glad you're having this today, and I appreciate the Town Hall Committee doing this because it needs to be discussed, but it needs to be discussed in a rational way where it's facts, not emotions, and at the end of the day, people can say, I understand it. Because if you don't understand government, you're scared of government. And sometimes we get scared of government by understanding it, but in this situation, I want you to know that we will do everything we can to explain to you that we will abide by the state and local laws, and I have not heard any change of official law at the state or federal level, even though everybody's talking about changing law. When it happens, a law doesn't change overnight. A law changes by having citizens give a lot of influence to their elected representatives, and that's the legislative branch. Remember, law enforcement's in the executive branch, and then the judicial branch of government, they interpret everything that's happened up until their point. So I'm glad that there's no anti-Trump or pro-Trump signs here, because this is not political. This is the law. And no matter where you stand, Republican, Democrat, Independent, the law is the law. And we as a country that lives by the law will abide by the law. And if you're not happy with the law, then change the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. So at this point, we had invited the district attorney to be here. He couldn't make it. We supplied him with some questions, and he did respond with some answers. And yeah, go up to the mic, sure. So Rosemary Landry is going to read the questions and the responses from the district attorney.
The first question was, in what circumstances would you cooperate with ICE and the federal government in the detention of undocumented immigrants for deportation and/or questioning? And he said, my office generally is not involved in detaining people. We are courtroom prosecutors and investigators. While the sheriff and the local police chiefs are the arms of law enforcement who are on the front line and most often interact with ICE, the DA's office occasionally provides post-plea or post-trial conviction information to all law enforcement agencies which make inquiry, including ICE, regarding criminals, almost always felons, who have suffered convictions in Mendocino County. The second question was, what is your view of California State Senate Bill SB 54, and how effective do you think it would be in protecting our community's immigration population? I just want to say that that bill is over here on the tables. Having given it just a brief look, I don't see anything in SB 54, the California Values Act, that is outwardly different than the way law enforcement has been operating in Mendocino County since I took office in January of 2011. Third question, if a person is arrested solely on the grounds of immigration status and has no other outstanding charges, will your office prosecute? And he says, prosecute what? If there are no outstanding state charges, there's nothing for us to prosecute. By definition, my office does not prosecute federal violations of law or status. Federal violations of law or status are in the business of the various U.S. attorneys, the federal prosecutors located in districts throughout the state. And the last question that he was asked was, regarding immigration, will the DA's office uphold federal or state policies? What responsibility does your office have to comply with and enforce new federal policies that refer to immigration status? He replies, the Mendocino County District Attorney's Office is a state constitutional office that was anticipated to be formed with the adoption of the California Constitution in 1849, a year ahead of statehood in 1850. I have been involved in the California state criminal justice system for over 30 years, since October 1984. I have been a state prosecutor for almost 20 years during that time frame. In my role as a state prosecutor, I have never prosecuted a federal violation of law or status, ever, and I don't expect that reality to change during my lifetime.
We're going to continue now with Mayor Gonzalez.
Well, I kind of came prepared to answer questions, but I talked to Tom the other day at Rotary, and he basically gave us the same speech you heard today. And I mean, it kind of sums things up. I mean, before coming onto the city council, I was the police chief in Willits for 13 plus years. And so, and the whole time I was police chief, it wasn't that we weren't enforcing or not enforcing immigration rules, it's just, it wasn't our job. It was one where we would arrest somebody for violent crime and they'd get sent to the jail, and as Tom put it, by law, everybody has to get fingerprinted, and then those reports are sent on to the state and federal governments, et cetera. And if in that process of the person going through the system, they were ultimately deported, it was something that we weren't involved with. And in most cases, I honestly can't remember a case where most of the time they were held to answer on our state charges and went off to state prison. So that wasn't a function. Right before I retired, we finished up our policies, but and that's why I'm very familiar with the fact that every agency in this county has a policy on immigration and following the rules. One of the things that happened back in at the end of 2013, I think it was codified in 2014, was the California Trust Act, which the governor signed into law. And it also spelled out some rules regarding, it basically codified what we were already practicing in Mendocino County, which was that we weren't going to use race-based ways to identify people when it came to crimes and look at immigration. It had to do with the fact that you stop people for criminal violations and you dealt with them appropriately, and that's how it was going to work. So all of that's been codified. That's in current policy and practice. And again, sometimes I hear from the other end of the coin that say, well, why aren't the police rounding them illegals up? I go, it's not our job. And I got to tell you, in the city of Willits, we're really short-staffed. I mean, not just at the police department. I can tell you now, as the mayor and city council, we have a lot of departments. It's not a real rich town. But at the police department, I'll tell you, I was the only police chief that was transporting prisoners on a regular basis, and we were booking felons. We weren't booking misdemeanants, and That meant that most people, if you committed a misdemeanor, were cited and released, and then you'd come into court later on. And then, if you didn't go to court, there'd be a warrant for your arrest, in which case I probably give you a ride back to jail because you didn't show up to court. And that is the state of affairs. So if tomorrow the federal government said, tell your police department to round people up, I can go, with what people? I mean, that's just the reality of life. So if anybody has questions, when we get to that point, I'll answer them. But I think that's where we're at right now. I think the sheriff and DA kind of summed it up. I honestly didn't see that we had a problem. I mean, I kind of thought, but yet I have to tell you, I do recognize the fact that, because I've asked a lot of folks, are Mexican people scared? And apparently they are. And it's all this rhetoric that's out there. I cannot do anything more than maybe show up at something like this and tell you that that's not what we're about. And again, for the other end of the coin, that it's not that we're ignoring our duties, those aren't our duties, that's not our job. And so we're not getting involved with that. I have heard that, like Tom said, the green bus, people are seeing things. The other day, I happened to be in our dispatch center helping out with something, and somebody was calling in that they saw a bunch of people in police police raid jackets, and it was ICE. We're all looking at each other going, really? And I think it turned out to be probation officers doing a probation search on a local probation person. So I'm sure people are seeing ICE agents coming out of the woodwork everywhere, and it's just not the case. So that's all I have. Thank you.
So Heather, before you start, Heather, you wanted to add something?
So I did want to follow up on what Gerry just said, because we are getting reports from across the county. We've heard from our clinics, our medical centers. We've heard from county employees that people are afraid to go to medical appointments. If they have citizen-born children, they're afraid to take them to appointments. And I just want to follow up that ICE, I have confirmed with them again that they have not changed anything. They're still operating under their sensitive locations policy. And so that means that anywhere, they're not doing enforcement on schools, medical premises, places of worship, or religious and civil ceremonies or observances. And I actually have copies of that over there. They're in English and Spanish. And that, there's also additional information. Some people are concerned about, what it means for them in the future. So if you have questions about that, like I said, I brought the agency's information, but we have heard that from across the county from different organizations. So I wanted to share that.
Good afternoon. My name is Saprina Rodriguez. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to thank Tom Allman. I had the pleasure about a month ago of listening to him at a leadership conference. And what he had to say really answered a lot of questions that I had, as well as I hear from members of the community. I am married to a Latino, and I interact every day with lots of Latino families as a coach, as a member of this community, and as an educator. And there is a level of fear about what our future holds, how that impacts our local community, and on a larger scale. Some of the fears are about ICE and how that's going to impact our community, but I think there's also another issue at hand, and that is that there seems to be a cultural shift that I've experienced personally, and I know that others feel in the last year, that people feel like when they're unhappy with something, there's this sense that they can just shout from the rooftops without maybe taking into account how that impacts others, which is creating more fear amongst those who feel oppressed. As a city council member, I'm one of 5, and I feel like it's my responsibility to listen to those in the community. Honestly, whether you live inside the city limits, or your zip code is 95490, or what your religious beliefs are, or what nationality you are, is really all irrelevant to me. It's my responsibility to be available and to listen. And I feel a strong sense that I'm in a position of leadership, and it's my job to advocate for equality at all levels. I wanted to address one other issue, and that was sanctuary city. A lot of people have asked, why doesn't Willits become a sanctuary city? And I did quite a bit of research on it, and sanctuary city is not even a legal term. It's a phrase that's come about, and at first I thought, well, okay, sanctuary city sounds good. But looking deeper into it, a sanctuary city, in essence, says that we will protect all people, whether they're criminals or not, and I can't support criminals regardless of where they come from or what nationality they are. I can't support criminals in our community. So I would want law enforcement, of course, to do their responsibility. One thing that we could do as a city is consider an ordinance, or I'm sorry, not an ordinance, a resolution about to send further up the chain to how Willits feels about this issue. I'm not sure what that resolution would look like. That's something that I would like to hear from the community and what you think about that. Thank you.
Well, at this time, we're going to open up the floor for comments and questions.
I think, just by seeing the people that came here today and hearing what we heard has really eased us, and we need to take it to our neighbors and let them know that they can count on us to be there for them, because it is very scary for them. I've worked with the Hispanic community for 30 years. I mean, I've worked side by side with people I knew were not legal, if you can say that somebody can be illegal just by being somewhere. But and I've talked to them lately, and they're really scared because they see this big figure up there barking off, we're going to round them up in the humane way. It sounds like he's talking about cattle. But, I think that it's a good thing I came here, because I'm going to go to my neighbors and my friends, and I'm going to tell them that Willits has got their back. And as a community, we can do this. And there ain't nothing they can rip away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to add, in addition, because there is a lot of fear and concern, and of course I can't tell someone with, no one can tell someone with 100% certainty that nothing will ever happen. The things that we're encouraging people to do are, one, know their rights, two, make sure that they have a plan in case of emergency. And in addition, as I said, one of our roles is to advocate on behalf of people who live in our district. And so I did bring some with me. We have an advocacy authorization form, and anyone can fill that out and sign it. They can return it to us and we'll keep it on file, or they can keep it with their important paperwork if something does happen. And that does give us the ability to inquire with an agency, because even if somebody is not legally present and is detained, they are still under Federal Privacy Act. So I can't just call and say, what's happening with this person? But people can keep it on hand if they're not comfortable giving it to us yet. If you want to have it on hand, like I said, we're happy to hold on to those if that's something that will make people feel more comfortable. But I always, when giving those out, please make sure you share with people what the likelihood is, because I don't want people to think that we're giving these out because there's a likelihood that they will be apprehended for no reason. So it's just something we're also offering.
Let me really briefly cover a couple things. One of the very first things that people who want us to enforce immigration will say is that every city council person, every government official in the state is sworn to uphold, they take the oath of office. So let me address that right now. If you came here with that question, you're going to be disappointed with my answer. We are sworn to uphold the Constitution of the State of California and the Constitution of the United States of America. But remember, there's a difference between upholding the Constitution and enforcing the laws. Upholding the Constitution means the Constitution and the 27 amendments that have been properly ratified that are attached to our wonderful Constitution. But it does not mean enforcing the law. And this conversation deals with marijuana also. Why, Sheriff, why aren't you enforcing federal law? I couldn't. If somebody doubled my salary, I couldn't legally do it. If the Board of Supervisors, they'll never double my salary, so I'm very comfortable with that. And I just want to let you know, you're not the only ones who are scared, people in this room. And and maybe this is more philosophical than it is fact, and I apologize for that since I was talking about fact, but I think that the Caucasian culture could learn a lot from the Hispanic culture, because the Hispanic culture is a much tighter community, for the most part, than the Caucasian culture. And so the way that we need to get the word out is exactly what you were saying. Instead of saying we're a sanctuary city, and county, whatever, or a school district, what we need to do is identify the 6 or 7 leaders in a Hispanic community. We sit down with them, we tell them exactly what's going on, and I'm going to say that in 24 hours, the word is going to be out there correctly, because that's the communication they have. And let me just end this part with this. 3 weeks ago, I was at the Boys and Girls Club in Ukiah. I was in uniform, I usually wear a uniform, and I walked in to do a presentation, and a 7-year-old boy, Hispanic young man, pulled at my pants leg and asked me if I was there to deport him. And I said, no, I'm here to protect you. And he said, my parents said you're here to deport me. So listen, I want the word to get out. I want the word to get out that local and state law enforcement officers are going to continue doing exactly what we're doing, and that's improving our quality of life and public safety in the community and protecting the citizens. So please don't think that you're the only people who have a heart, because that tore me up a lot. And no, I told him I gave him a little badge, and I told him I hope he grows up to be a deputy sheriff, because that's the kind of kid we need there. So thank you.
I hate saying this, but here I am. A couple weeks ago in the Chronicle was an article about what happened in Santa Cruz, and I'm sure a bunch of us know about it, where there is a really kind of demarcated Latino community, Beach Flats in Santa Cruz, collective group, sort of an expedient little neighborhood there for ICE to just come on in, and they had gone to the local police and said, we're going to only look for criminal activity, or they had a lead on gang activity or something. But they just rounded up a bunch of other people as well, and the police were quoted as being up in arms and very, naturally offended that ICE had stepped on their toes. And I want to think you guys are not going to have your toes stepped on. What can you tell us that would lead us to feel confident that I don't think you can say that can't happen here, but it hasn't happened. But can you give us confidence about that?
The Homeland Security Department does many things other than immigration. And whether it's trigger lock, the federal gun law of going after illegal assault weapons, whether it's working with gangs, there are major issues that happen. And if somebody has a jacket on that says Homeland Security Police, that is much different than Homeland Security ICE. So what I'm going to tell you is I'm not going to shun any federal agency from coming through. However, I'm going into the meeting with my eyes wide open. And questions that I'm going to ask are exactly dealing with what happened in other agencies in our state. So I'm not going to sit here and say we're not going to work with the federal agents, because as we know, we have a huge marijuana situation in this county, and we have 11 unsolved homicides, and some of them have to do with Hispanics. It's a fact. I'm not making this up. And so if we have an opportunity to solve those unsolved homicides and allow a family to get some kind of resolution, we're going to work on it. But as far as if a federal representative came in my office and said, we're here to go after illegal immigrants, I would say I'd like for my deputy to go along, but we certainly do not prioritize that as something that we're going to go along with. So like I said, I don't think you're going to like my answer, because I'm not going to say that'll never happen, but what I'm going to say is that we're not a bunch of Abbott and Costello Keystone cops. We actually know what we're doing, and we're going to make sure that our answers are given to us before we go into any kind of agreement.
I think that's a very good question, and for me the answer is, what are we going to do now about it? It's really a lot of times it's about prevention. We don't want to wait until there is an issue either in our homes or in our neighborhood. It's about how are we going to be leaders today. Are we writing our elected officials and letting them know how we feel? Are we standing up in our community and saying this is not okay, and we're going to all stand together? And that, for me, that's where it's at.
Gerry.
And and I think in what happened in Santa Cruz, I was reading about all of that before this meeting, and it looks like they had an issue with an MS-13 gang issue down there in Santa Cruz, where they had shakedowns on businesses, threats, and when Homeland Security came in, I think in talking to their police department, I think it was with the intent that they were going after those gang members. I think where the betrayal happened with the police department and Homeland Security was that I think some of the agents used that opportunity to detain some of the ICE agents assigned to that. And again, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback because I don't have all the facts. I'm just getting this from the news. But I think that's where the issue was, that the intent was to deal with the serious gang issue that they have down there. And then some folks were detained. I think they had 10 people that they had warrants for that they were going to detain. And then I think an additional 10, according to, I read this on Channel 7's news feed there.
They had warrants for crimes that they had committed,
Yeah,
not just,
that's who they were
not
going
just
after.
the immigration
An additional
status.
10 people, I think, were detained. I think only one ultimately was held on immigration. Other folks, I think, were released, and maybe Heather knows more about that.
I don't have specifics about Santa Cruz, but like I said, I've been in touch with the agency. And by the way, anytime our office, if someone is concerned that there is a raid happening here in the county, I call them and find out, is there an ICE presence in the county or anywhere up and down the district, and what is the situation? And so far, the only situation that ICE has been in the entire 2nd Congressional District over the last 2 months is that there were ICE agents who were providing translation for a Humboldt County Drug Task Force enforcement. So that's the only thing that we've been able to confirm. Everything else has been rumors that are going around. So I just want to share a little bit information because immigration itself is a very expansive topic. So when we're talking about ICE, they are, and as the sheriff said, they're not holding people. So if somebody is a criminal who has served their time and they are a priority for deportation enforcement, immigration enforcement or deportation, then they are going to have to go out in the community to get this person. Again, they're avoiding sensitive locations, but once ICE is out there, they do have the authority to check immigration status of anybody who is with that person. Now, in their situation, there's two options. They can detain somebody, but keep in mind, in California in general, they don't have a facility for immigration enforcement in Northern California, so they're renting space. The space that they rent is from Yuba County Jail. It's extremely limited. So they don't have space to hold on to somebody who is not a danger to the public. Now, if they do detain somebody or they bring in somebody who is in violation of immigration laws, then what will happen to that person is they will get, go start the intake process for deportation proceedings, but basically they'll be sent back out into the community until they have their court date. And as you have also probably heard in the news, which is accurate, is that our immigration courts are way, way, way behind. So the last time that there was actually a raid up in our area that we know of was in 2007 in Humboldt County. It was the Sun Valley Farm raid, and there was about 20 individuals who were picked up. And that was 10 years ago, and they're still going through legal proceedings. So it's not a fast process, even if somebody is picked up. If they're not a public safety issue, then most likely they're going to be released back into the community, and they do have check-ins, but there's not also, you might have heard they talk about the expedited deportations. We talked to the agency about that, and basically their answer at this time, they don't even have a policy or procedure really to do that up in the interior. So anywhere that's more than 100 miles from a land border. So that's not something that's happening either.
It's very reassuring about how we're handling this at the local level, but I've also heard, from a friend a person who was undocumented and was living here for 12 years or more, and is now legal, but during that period they were working. And because they were working, they had to give a false social security number or something. And apparently, under federal policy right now, when they say criminals will be enforced and deported and whatever, that includes anybody who committed fraud by giving a social security number so they could work while they were here, which is really, so in terms of influencing federal policy and enforcement on this, I think that's a big concern. When the president says we're going to go after the bad dudes, if he means virtually everybody who committed fraud in order to work, that's going to just mean millions of people, families, all of that. So it isn't really a question directed to you particularly, but people who are in that position are frightened because if they get picked up in a sweep or whatever,
Yeah.
they're vulnerable.
No, and Madge, that has come up before, and that was a question. So we actually had a face-to-face meeting with ICE in our office, and that was a point-blank question, like, is using a false social security number, is that considered fraud? Is that something you're pursuing? And they were like, they're worried about M13 or MS-13 and gangs, and that's what they have the capacity for at this time. So that's not something that's considered priority for them.
Hello, I'm Janae Stevens, and I want to bring the conversation back to the whole concept of sanctuary, because I heard what you were saying, Tom, that we don't want to be at the spearhead by creating a policy about being a sanctuary community. But if we look back in history, really it was never a policy. During the Holocaust, there was the resistance. During the time of the Civil War, there was the Underground Railroad. And it was really about a bunch of concerned citizens who wanted to protect people. And, there's basically two emotions, and it all boils down to love and fear, and there's a lot of fear going around, and I think it's really important that we as a community, show our love, and I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could create some kind of policy that would encourage these sanctuaries so people know that if things change, and things can change. I mean, I read the book 1984 by George Orwell when I was in high school, and I feel like I'm living it now. Anyway, so I think I made myself clear. Thank you.
Well, I grew up here in Willits. I grew up speaking Spanish, and I can tell you that it's cyclical is what's happening now. There were times when growing up, immigration would come and do sweeps in I want to say probably the late 70s, I think was that era. I still remember my dad bought a green van at the dealership in Ukiah, and we actually had somebody come knock on our door and find out why immigration had parked a van on our street. And my mom said, that's my husband's new van that we got to go to Mexico, and it's not immigration. And at the time, people were seeing that. And I also don't believe in I guess if we say it's a sanctuary city, I think that that's the wrong thing. I think that doing what Mr. Welch said is the way to go out there. We know who we are as a community. Our actions should speak louder than any words, especially words that, frankly, aren't enforceable by the feds, and realistically, I think that as a community, we should come together and reassure everybody here. And again, in the last 13 years that I was police chief, nothing happened like that. And as Heather pointed out, it's been since 2007 since something like that happened. I think that looking for what's going to happen in the future, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But then again, if somebody is here illegally, they have broken the law. Now, granted, albeit we can get into, is it a civil law? Is it, at what point is it a misdemeanor, a felony, et cetera? But locally, we are not enforcing those laws. So.
Can I just clarify something? I wasn't suggesting that. I guess what I'm suggesting is I'm wondering, okay, here's the question. Is there some way that we could create some kind of language to, I hear you saying that we're going to say something that can reassure people who are afraid. And it's not just the Hispanic community, it's also, we have a Muslim community. And so create some kind of language and some kind of infrastructure that people can rely on, and really, we just have to create a feeling of safety. I guess that's what I want to say. Thank you.
So this is from the audience, and it refers to the Senate Bill 54, the California Values Act. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'll summarize it really quickly. SB 54 ensures that no state or local resources are diverted to fuel any attempt by the federal government to carry out mass deportations, and that our schools, our hospitals, and our courthouses are safe places for everyone in our community. This bill, which is in the California Congress, would, among other things, prohibit state and local law enforcement agencies and school, police, and security departments from using resources to investigate, interrogate, detain, detect, or arrest persons for immigration enforcement purposes. So there's a little bit more information about this on the table, and this is something they're talking about in the Congress right now, and I'm just curious. Legislature, thank you. Official terminology. Yes, the state legislature. Just curious what you could do in your official capacities to support this bill, and if you've heard about it.
The State Sheriff's Association is taking opposition to the bill. We believe that there's some correction that could be done on it. And I know many people are against any laws being enforced at a courthouse. And while I don't promote immigration going to a courthouse in a courtroom is often where people are seen who are convicted of violating the law. And I believe there is a correlation between identifying violent convicted criminals and using the laws we have to make our community safer. So while this isn't a popular answer, the State Sheriff's Association has not completely opposed the bill. We believe that there's some correction on it that could be done, and that would put us in a position to support the bill. This corrections would be about 6 hours long, and I don't have everything in front of me to talk about it. I'm sorry. But let's remember this. Illegal immigration is a federal law, as the mayor, the chief, and I have discussed earlier. And if it's a federal law and the state legislature is saying we don't want state and local law enforcement officers to enforce federal law, I'm telling you there's some statewide politicians who are trying to rattle their saber and say, look how good I am, when they're not paying attention to actually what the law is. We already can't enforce the law, nor do we want to enforce the law, but there's some politicians who say, we don't think you should enforce the law. Well, we're not. So, but what I'm saying is, we as a citizenry, if we see somebody violating that, if we see a state or local law enforcement officer violating that and arresting someone for illegal immigration, there's absolutely clear recourse that we can take. And that's what we need to do. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, what should we do if it happens? Let me know if it happens, and as your sheriff, we will do a full investigation, and we'll make sure that number one, the facts come out, that this is really what happened, if it is, and if it is, then we'll take the right recourse.
From my end, as one member of the City Council, that I have not seen what the League of Cities position is on it, and to be honest with you, one thing I've learned, as the police chief, I had the California Police Chiefs Association. They have folks that dissect these sort of things to find out where either it's a good thing or a bad thing, or what needs to be tweaked so that we cover all the bases. Because sometimes we look at things in a rather cosmopolitan way here in Mendocino County, because when we don't think there's a problem, maybe there is a problem in the language. And so my answer would be, I have not looked at the bill enough to take it apart and looked at what League of Cities has a position on it yet. I was at a League of Cities meeting and they discussed it, and I was trying to get more information on it, but I think it's still being batted around. And so am I ready to support it? I don't have all the facts yet, so.
The Sheriff's Office has 20 bilingual employees, of course there is, including dispatch, sure.
So I speak Spanish, and I'm bilingual, y si alguien tiene cualquier pregunta, estoy aquí para cualquier cosa. So yeah, I'm here, I speak Spanish. We also have several other staff, so.
yo también hablo español. But I'll tell you that all the police departments have access to a translation service, so whether you have somebody on staff or not, they would then use a service to translate. Obviously, in a best world scenario, they'll try and get somebody to translate, but if not, they'll use that 911 uses a translation service so that they can get a hold of somebody and at least get the facts going.
And I speak broken Spanish, so fortunately I am married to a Hispanic who is a wonderful translator on my behalf.
I'm Teresa, and I work for Project Sanctuary, so I help the Hispanic community in domestic violence. So what we've had is that some of our clients have been afraid of coming forward when they've been in a domestic violence situation, and one of the biggest threats is deportation. Also, we've had several clients who have been arrested for domestic violence. Because of the language barrier, one of the law enforcement had to arrest one of them, and of course the other one knew the English language and she didn't. So that's one of our major concerns right now with Project Sanctuary is, I don't know how much we can tell our clients that they will not be deported, but the threat from the husband or boyfriend is saying, if you tell on me, I will call ICE and deport you.
There is something called the Violence Against Women's Act, and there is protection for people who have had those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
So, and I actually did bring one of the brochures. So that is something that we really strongly support as continuing. And what was the other question?
Well, I am aware of that, but okay. It takes a long time for our clients to come to us because of the immigration status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Also, apparently there were some new rules. They're called T visas and U visas for victims. Obviously, Project Sanctuary is probably wired into that. The DA's office is wired in, victim witness is wired into that. And so if you're a true victim and you're cooperating with the prosecution, you're able to basically get resident status. And the idea is that we need to have you here to help prosecute the bad guy.
How do we inform the Hispanic community in Mendocino County as to what we're discussing today?
In your case, Teresa, you're dealing with a lot of the victims, and I think the more this gets out there, as far as the availability of these sort of visas to help victims. I mean, I think that was the crucial thing under the Governor's Trust Act, or I'm not sure if it was his act, but when he signed that, the idea was that we needed to have victims feel that they could come forward without fear of prosecution and cooperate. And on the law enforcement side, you wanted victims to feel like they could trust the police. And I'll tell you, I think they've been talking about that subject for years, and I think it'll continue because folks are always going to be suspicious.
And I just want to add, Teresa, anytime, I'm always happy to talk to any group. That's part of my role as Mendocino County field rep. I'm happy to come and visit. And so there's ICE is sort of, they divided up everything in, I forget what year it is off the top of my head, but ICE is the enforcement side, but USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Service, is the benefits branch. So they're sort of like have a good cop, bad cop thing going. And USCIS provides a lot of information. They're always happy to do outreach, and I'm very happy to connect you with information that we can share.
A week ago, there was an event that was held in Miami that was broadcast and streamed live across the country. It was put on by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Some of you, maybe a lot of you know about that, but we happen to live in a community and in a county that is, we're lucky because Sheriff Allman says, they're not going to contribute to the deportation circus, I guess. Throughout the country, that's not the case. If that's the same state laws that prohibit the local law enforcement people from helping the federal government, although we as a small community are here to find out about this, we're part of a much bigger group. We're not just a lone we're part of a big group, and so we're not alone.
Hi, I'm Katarzyna Rolzinski from Ukiah, and thank you for having this here. Afterwards, I'd like to talk to Tom Allman about, there's a Latino woman in Ukiah that really wants to set something up where it would be more of the Latino population. I told her I'd try to help her. Anyway, as you likely know, there are a number of households where in that same family, that same house, there are people here legally and some that are not. And in discussions, I don't know of anything currently, maybe you do, other than for them to go back to Mexico and come back in through a process. Are there any other ways currently, people that are in a family with some legal and some not, that they can get anywhere?
And it is so dependent on the situation. It's a very, very limited range of people who have options if they did not enter through an inspected process and don't have either asylum, TPS, which is temporary protected status. So, but or the VAWA program. So if you're a victim or your T or U visa, it's fairly limited and complicated. But it really just depends on who has status, what the status is, and but it's very limited. There's not a lot of options.
I'd like to add something quickly. I think often if you're not familiar or you don't know somebody who's gone through the process of trying to become a legal resident, I've heard it said, well, it's not that hard. Why don't they just come here legally? And I have to tell you that my husband and I submitted an application for a family member to come over in the 1990s, and here we are, 2017, and the application still has not been accepted, and this individual is still going through the process. So this is by no means an easy process, and I think sometimes that's a common misunderstanding.
I went to a meeting last week at the ARC Family Resource Center in Ukiah. It was all in Spanish, and it was a chance for the Hispanic community to voice their concerns, and they're afraid, but what are those specific fears? And I think the biggest one that came up was if the parents are deported, what will happen with the children, and also what will happen with their belongings. And I know you said that it's not your job, you won't be deporting people, but you also can't really prevent ICE from coming here if they want to come, and if you know the answers to those questions of what will happen with the children.
Well, thank you for the question, but if you don't mind me saying, it's extremely hypothetical. And what would happen to them, I don't know. I mean, let's look at the facts. My job is to make sure that human beings' rights are protected. And my job is not to make sure that their citizenship gets approved, and I'm not going to stand in the way of their citizenship. Nobody wants to separate children from their parents. Let's be very clear about that. And no local person wants to separate children from their parents. I'm not going to answer such an emotional question without knowing the facts. I'm very sorry, other than to say, I, as your sheriff, will make sure that I can do everything I can do to make sure the right thing is done. But other than that, it's almost, and I know it happened in Southern California. But that incident has turned into an urban legend where it is scaring people. And as I told the school district in Ukiah, the very people we're trying to calm are getting scared because everybody's talking about it. So allow the government officials who can make those changes to make the changes, and let's move on. But I'm not going to sit here and say it'll never happen because I don't want to be a liar, but I can say that if it does happen, local law enforcement will do everything we can to get involved to make sure that the right thing is done. Okay?
As Tom said, it's very hypothetical, but people should have a plan, and it doesn't matter, you know, whether you're a legal permanent resident or whether you're not. I mean, you should always have a plan for your children in case of emergency, because anything can happen to a parent. So it's just like you could die, you could end up incapacitated. So in that same right, if that is something that has that limited potential in your life, everybody needs to make sure that they have plans and that they've prepared for, you know, what are the assets that I have, and, you know, what do I need to do to make sure that my children are safe? And so there are local groups that are working with families doing that.
An article in the Mendocino Voice, I think it came out Friday, I don't remember, but I did the translation for it, and they spoke with a consulate, the Mexican consulate. The Mexican consulate has a mobile unit that comes, and I think they're not coming in this area until like something like August or something. But they do suggest, they have several suggestions that you can do, and is exactly what Heather said. You can have a plan. One of the things that you can do if you are going to be deported and you have citizens, children who are citizens of the United States, one of the things that you must do and should do before it happens is to have a designated adult who will take over your children's care. You should designate an adult to take care of your children. Your rights as a parent are not terminated because you leave the country. You still have parental rights. Another thing, too, that they usually say is if your child is a citizen, you need to have a birth certificate from the United States, and you can also register your child in the Mexican consulate. And I'm talking specifically Mexican because I'm Mexican and that's what I know, and that's the consulate that the Mendocino Voice spoke with. You need to register your children at a Mexican consulate so they have dual citizenship, and you have the option of taking them with you or leaving them here with the designated adult. Another thing too, there was an article in La Opinión from Los Angeles about whether you have property rights. If you own a home here in the United States and you are undocumented, you still own this property whether you're deported or not. Your legal rights as far as that property are not terminated because you've left the country or you've been deported from the country. You should have a trust, or you should also have a designated adult. But anyway, you can read this more in detail. I did the translation and I can't remember every detail. On the Mendocino Voice online paper, they have all the information there because they spoke with the Mexican government. Okay?
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. The person's asking, it was referred to that ICE, it may be going to courts to observe and look for illegal immigrants in that way, and that way find felons and illegal immigrants. And if that sort of thing is happening, then what happens to victims of crimes, like rape victims, if they are afraid to come forward? So maybe what paths could victims take to not be afraid to be in the courts?
I apologize. My answer was not interpreted as I intended it to. We were talking about the statewide proposition, or statewide bill, which is going through the state legislature, and that was one of the things that they're saying is that a courthouse should be somewhat of a sanctuary city. It's certainly, that question is a good question, but the question needs to be posed to ICE and not us, because we are very supportive of victims' rights, and the district attorney has a victims' rights office, and he'll do everything he can to make sure that the victims are taken care of. But a sex victim, a physical assault victim, those are people who we do everything we can to protect. So I apologize to whoever wrote that question for me not presenting my answer correctly.
Okay, and they had a little second part to it, just wondering if ICE is required to be in uniform.
I've seen them both ways. I've seen Hispanic ICE officers undercover, so I don't think those are their policies, not mine. I don't think they're limited on how they can do their job.
Thank you.
I'm Sherry Abiam. I'm a Willits resident. I have a two-part question. The first part is I've seen little red cards that have been printed and offered to immigrants with the suggestion written on the card. It says, "I do not wish to speak with you, answer your questions, or sign or hand you any documents based on my Fifth Amendment rights under the United States Constitution. And I do not give you permission to enter my home based on my Fourth Amendment rights." And it goes on from there. So I'm wondering, what papers must ICE agents have when they arrive at the door of someone's house? What papers do they actually have to be able to present that coerces someone to have to speak with them, and or that allows them to take that person away?
Very simple. Our Constitution does not differentiate between affording these rights to citizens versus non-citizens. So if any citizen or non-citizen does not want law enforcement to enter their house, then the law enforcement officer would have to present a paper signed by a magistrate or judge that would allow them to do so. Now, as far as speaking, Miranda rights apply to everybody, whether you're a citizen or not a citizen, as long as you're in the United States. And so they would have the same rights that you and I have. Does that answer your question? So
Yes, so they have to have a signed paper, basically.
they have to have a warrant, a court order, yes.
Okay.
And now with that, let me just tell you, when somebody comes into our jail and immigration wants to speak to them, we give them this form in their language that gives them 3 options, and it briefly talks about their rights. Their options are, yes, I want to speak to the immigration officer. Yes, I want to speak to the immigration officer, but only with my attorney. Or no, I don't want to speak to the immigration officer. And then they sign it, and then our employees follow whatever their signature is.
If someone is taken away from their home, whether at that point it's not known to the ICE agents whether they are legal or illegal, what resources are available to immigrants, local resources? Are they entitled to a public defender? What resources are available?
But hypothetically, if a person was taken into custody by immigration, most likely they would be transported to the San Francisco office, and they would see a federal magistrate in the San Francisco U.S. District Court, and yes, they would be afforded a United States public defender if they requested one.
Thank you, Sherry.
I know there's attorneys in this audience without making eye contact with them. So if I say something wrong, any attorney in this audience is welcome to throw the flag and say what I said is not correct, because I am not here to offer legal advice.
And I think what I've been hearing, I mean, you all said it, and I echo all the confidence that I'm hearing from all of the leaders here. And I think what I'm hearing is there's so much fear in the air that what we're looking for is common language that gives us a sense of, hey, we're on the same side. And I think that's what we're talking about, resources in the sense of something that's out there that we can all respond to. Right now, the sheriff and the city are saying, yes, we're already doing that. And so I think, I don't know, from my point of view, it's like, okay, how can we put a statement out into the community that says what we're talking about here? Is there a way to do that? I mean, this is part of it, but is there a way to reach everybody? That's the question for me, to you.
Well, I think as a city, I briefly spoke earlier about the possibility of a resolution. I'm one of 5 that sits on the council, so no council member on their own can make any decision. We collectively have to make that decision, but it's a good point. It's a point worth discussing at a future council meeting. Gerry had brought up the League of California Cities. They're somebody important that we listen to in decision making, so we would want to get a little bit of feedback from them, maybe have some discussion about how council members feel about SB 54, and just continue this conversation. And I thank you for today, because this is an important part of allaying those fears and getting the word out.
Our Town Hall Planning Committee is just a loosely structured group of people that care very much about our community and really feel that the best way to have a stronger community is to come together and to talk and to share our ideas, and I too have, I'm struggling with rhetoric that sounds violent towards some of us. And normally when we have a town hall meeting, we book our meetings ahead 2 to 3 months, and we pushed this one together in a month and a half because we were all so concerned about these issues that were coming up. Okay, maybe they're not happening in our community, but if the fear is permeable to make an old person like me hustle that fast, you know there's some things going on. And I think that by looking the other way, I try to be a very positive, optimistic person, and I think whistling in the dark is very good, but getting together with your neighbors is even better. And so I just think this is so important. This is the most well-attended town hall we've had, which shows me, and I think our public officials as well, this is something our community was very concerned about. We are blessed, as Randy said, to live in a community that really cares deeply and is willing to stand up and show that. And you know, I have to say, I think I have family that live in Tennessee and Oklahoma and all over, family in Florida. It's not so liberal there, folks. But I'll tell you what, people care a lot in those places too. And I think that's one of the reasons why our country is so divisive right now. I think it's gotten to where we don't talk with each other about challenging issues. We want to avoid it. I know I want to avoid it. I have lots of friends that don't think the same as I do, and I tend to not want to talk about those topics with them. I think we need to talk about those topics, folks, not just at town hall meetings. So I honor all of you for coming, and if any of you want to participate in being a part of our town hall planning committee, you can either get on the committee by contacting either Jim or I, or you can raise your hand after, come over and talk to us about a topic that you think would be a really good thing to talk about. And there is going to be another town hall meeting coming up on April the 23rd. That one is going to be held at the Grange. About 8 different topics. Is Anna Perna still here?
It's called Action, Not Despair.
Yes, it's called Action, Not Despair. Anna Perna, would you come up and give the exact specific topics it's on?
This is probably one of the best topics we've had. I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Mexico City, and I don't think I'm going to be deported anytime soon. But it's not something that I don't worry about. It's something that I worry about my parents. But the thing that a lot of people in this room have already been the tail end of my rants. And that's one thing, that we're all very concerned about what's going on with the immigrant population. But look around. Look around. I may be the only person with brown eyes in here. I may be the only, okay, well, I may be the only person of color. I see another person of color. I'm a person of color. And another, okay. So, in this, I have gone to many meetings. I belong to a lot of groups here in Willits. And I go to a lot of meetings and I will say, look, I'm the only person with brown eyes in this room. What's going on? 25% of the population here in Willits is people of color like me. But you don't go to the meetings and you don't see people of color in the meetings. You see a lot of people with gray hair. So, and I have gray hair, I use Miss Clairol. What we really need to do, from my perspective, is we really need to talk to our neighbors and those who are not our neighbors. We need to really reach out. If we are concerned about the immigrant population in our city, we need to talk to immigrants, not just about immigrants. We need to address that because it's not happening in this community. And I see it as an immigrant. So take this with you. Who are you going to reach out to? And don't just reach out to white people. Reach out to me and people like me. That's it.
So the next town hall meeting we're organizing is April 23rd at the Willits Grange. It's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a lot of different topics. There's going to be a facilitator for each topic that gets like a 5-minute introduction, speaking to everybody about it, and then we're going to break out into discussion groups, all happening simultaneously about each topic. So there's the environment, women's issues, healthcare, immigration, Native issues, racial justice, LGBT issues, local sustainability, and youth issues.
We tend to look forward at leaders. We tend to look at the groups that are organized here. I've heard listed all the topics, and this is all wonderful. And we take the locus of responsibility is just unconscious, and we put it on others. However, I get to look at faces that I don't know the Spanish language. I would love to know it, and maybe someday before I die, I might learn enough to really communicate my heart. However, what can we do? What can you do? What can you do? What can you do? What can you do? You. What can you do? What can you do? What can I do? I don't always know what I can do, but I'm very aware of other people. Mother Teresa says, love your neighbor. What's the rest of it? Love your neighbor as... And then she said, bless her memory, do you know your neighbor? I'm not just talking about the people next door to us, because we can be pretty in my house and my garden and my finances and my lack of them. But what about people that we see that we don't know, and they don't get seen by the majority of the population? What is our opportunity? Each person, what can we do? I don't know you, and I didn't know Irma until we started talking. Her and her desire to speak more fluently the language, mine and my desire to hear her more fluently and with my heart, and things started to happen. That's how things start to happen. Make them happen. They can't all make it happen. The person that's videotaping this, the leaders, the people we see as other than ourselves, our leaders, our police department, our congressperson, other than ourselves, what does that mean? That's us. That's us. Come on, let's take our ability, our intelligence, our power, our love, and give it to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I think it's really great that we are all such wonderful people, and that our law enforcement are such wonderful people, and that it's very unlikely that when the federal government starts going crazy, they're going to knock on our doors. I grew up in the 40s, and I was a teenager during the McCarthy era, and it's very easy to think they're never going to knock on our doors. But the plain fact is, after they knocked on the doors in Miami and New York and Chicago, we're going to be next. And it won't take them that long to get from San Francisco or Los Angeles to here either. So I hope all of us at the time right now, when we don't have to worry about what's happening in our community, that we worry about and reach out and give as much support as we possibly can to all the places in the rest of the United States where people are scared to death for a good reason.
My name is Martin Rodriguez, and I've been a member of Willits all of my life. I wasn't born here, but I consider myself a Willits resident. I've been here since I was a little boy. I just want to thank all of you guys that came out. Like you said, there's not many people of my color, and a lot of that I've talked to is because they were afraid. They were afraid to speak out. They were afraid that they're going to be shunned. They're going to be afraid they're going to be prosecuted. We know that's not the case, but it's hard to tell somebody not to be afraid. So the best thing, like you said, you could do is talk to your neighbors, let them know what the laws are, what they can do, what their rights are. And I also want to reiterate something that my wife said, is that it is not easy to become legal. I speak firsthand. I come from the family where half of us are legal and half of us were not. I still have a sister that is not legal. She's been waiting since 1990 to become legal. My dad passed away last year. We tried so hard to get her here before he passed. We were not able to. They did not grant her a visitor's visa until after she had passed. So she, even though she was not able to be here for her funeral, she was able to visit the U.S. for 3 months. And we are grateful for that. But to all my friends that think that it's so easy for us to become legal, it is not. Thank you.
So I want to invite the panel if they have any further words or comments, and also the audience in a minute.
Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for having me here. And if you have any additional questions in español o inglés, cualquier, I'm more than happy to talk. I left my cards. I also left a copy of our advocacy authorization forms, and the policies that I spoke about are all on that table. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you very much.
Both Saprina and I have voicemail and email addresses for the city, so you can send your questions or call us there. You want to pick up the phone per se. I don't have an office like I used to have, but I'm running around town all the time, so I kind of made the point that you want to stop and chat. If my dog barks at you, then we might have to reschedule it. But she's in doggy obedience school right now, so I'm trying to get her so she will hold still. And so I think just being more engaged. I went to a League of Cities event the other day. There was a Hispanic young man that's on the city council in Puerto Rico, and we chatted a little bit about how things have changed a little bit. And I told him I was really happy that young people are becoming more engaged in politics out there. So I think that if anything, I know that everybody here is a little gray, as somebody pointed out, but I think encouraging young people to get involved out there and have a voice is important too.
Yes, go to thecityofwillits.org and you'll find our phone number and email address on there. But as I'm sitting here talking and listening, I'm looking out in the crowd and I'm thinking, they're thinking we're leaders, and I'm looking at all of these people who've come to this meeting today, and I'm thinking what wonderful leaders we have in the community, because I know that each of you is going to go out and show leadership in spreading the word in the community, so thank you.
I certainly would like to thank you for being here. I've taken 2 hours of your day on your weekend to be here to discuss something that is critical to dispel rumors. So, as I've said earlier, if you see anybody from the sheriff's office doing something wrong or questionable, that's when you contact me, and I'll do everything I can to get your answers. I won't be here on the 23rd. I'll be out of town, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm very grateful this ended earlier than it was supposed to.
Now, you're not building a wall, are you? You're building a fence, right?
To keep them in, not to keep them out.
We have those free postcards. If you would like to send something to our governor, district office, Jim Wood, Gerry Brown, various addresses of local officials in regards to anything that we talked about today, but also about the SB 52, the sanctuary, 54, excuse me, the sanctuary bill coming up in our state legislature.
That's the California Values Act. Yeah. SB 54.
Hello, my name is Kubas. A few of you know me. I put on events in town, and one of the things that my dad and my mom came from England, and I've known a lot of people that have come over to this country over the years, and the one thing that has brought a lot of my family together with people in the community is getting together and being not exclusive but inclusive. And when we put on events, I really want people to know that that includes everybody, not just a certain sector of us. And when you put on events yourself, include more people. And there's divisions, and I've noticed since I moved here, 21 years ago I moved here, And there was a lot of potlucks, there was a lot of openness, and there still is, but I think we can open that gate a little more, and hopefully on both sides and all sides, we can get a little closer to each other and find out who each other are. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
In other words, everybody's welcome around the fire. I think that's the way we should operate.
Right. Let's start roasting. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And the panel is on, but